Testing. Check 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Check 1.
Yeah. You got enough of that? Sounds
Check
good.
1. Check 2.
The way this record came to be, it was that I was recording demos, so I was trying to figure out what I was going to sing about. I thought this was going to be sort of a record full of love songs originally. And then I had all this recording gear set up in my living room that a friend of mine, Brandon Bell from Nashville, came and set up. And I was singing all these demos, but then all of a sudden I was in the middle of Holy Week at my church, or we were gearing up for Holy Week, so I had to really switch gears and start thinking of songs about the crucifixion, about the Last Supper, and I had all these sacred art images that we use at church, Byzantine all the way through contemporary art, and so I was looking at those on my computer, writing music at the piano. And then I thought, man, this is what the record is going to be. Really, it's going to be. What I've set out to do is a series of records that are based on the church calendar that will talk about it. You know, when this thing is complete, it'll start with Advent, go into Christmas, Epiphany, Lent, Holy Week, so into Easter, and then you know. We'll see how where it winds up. It should be, I think, in the end, probably about 6 records. So this is the first installment of those 6. Some of the things that were popping into my head as we were writing this record, it's co-written. Most of it's co-written with a friend of mine named Bernard Chadwick, who's a visual artist. He teaches art in a college in California, and then he's also a worship leader at his church, which is right near the Fuller Seminary campus in Pasadena, California. So it's a bunch of seminarians that go to his church. So it wasn't so much, I would say, images as much as we were listening to Johann Sebastian Bach's St. John Passion. And that was our template. We went through the written parts of that mass and said, okay, we're going to write, this song is next, this song is next. So we just went through, we started with Triumphal Entry of Jesus into Jerusalem. So we didn't end up writing that song. We took a pre-existing hymn and wrote a new melody to it. Prepare the way, O Zion, your King is drawing near, your Christ is drawing near. Let every hill and valley a level way appear. So, and then the cleansing of the temple was next. So we wrote the album in sequence, if that makes sense. The cleansing of the temple, and then the Last Supper, Jesus' agony in the garden, and then his torture and on into the end where he was crucified. It ends with the crucifixion of Jesus, this particular record. What I've done with our church is I've amassed maybe 200 or 300 images painted by great artists, like I said, from Byzantine to contemporary, but the main parts of that were maybe paintings by Caravaggio or people who were well known for painting sacred art. Nikolai Ged, the Russian painter. So we would, how we did it was Bernard would say, "Here's this image. You go in the living room, and I'll go in the back patio, and let's see what we come up with a story about this painting." And so that's the visual part of it.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it was very challenging. I feel like I experienced God in all kinds of ways during this project. Often, since I was alone for the big bulk of it, as I mentioned, my friend Brandon set up recording equipment in my house, and then I was just there for the better part of a year recording this stuff. And there were times when I would there are several spoken parts on the record that are just scripture passages. So the one leading into communion where he says, you know, this bread is my body broken for you, I would get very emotional because I had to read it over and over to get the inflection right and make sure I wasn't sounding all nasally and all that stuff. But in the rehearsing, in the repetition, some of those passages all of a sudden were way more real to me than they had ever been in my life. And then there was one song on there we were writing called "O Great Love, O Love Beyond All Measure," that you would lay down your life for faithless sinners. while we were working on that lyric, a young woman in Bernard's church died giving birth, and we were stuck on this one line that we just couldn't get it to rhyme. It didn't make sense. Bernard went to go sing at that funeral. When he came back, he said, "I don't know if this makes sense or not, but one of her favorite sayings was struck down but not destroyed," and it fit just perfectly into this one spot of the song. And I don't know, it was a gift, and it was but it was one that came from a really deep sadness, Two things come to mind when you ask this question about if the emotion of a song led us toward a certain instrument. The first one is the cleansing of the temple. I've always thought of Christ coming through that temple fairly angry and impassioned, and so I knew that I wanted it to be electric guitars. We used electric guitar and pedal steel as well, and but I also knew that I wanted it to be very percussive, sort of thundering. And I don't know, if you listen to the thing at fairly high volume, you can hear that Bernard, he's a percussionist. He's just pounding the snot out of those drums. So it's a pretty effective track, I think, to convey that sort of anger. And the second that comes to mind is the Psalm 22, where, my God, why have you forsaken me? What I did on that song is it says piano on the credits, and it is piano, but I just hit chords like this, and then we didn't use the strike of the chord. We just used what was the sustain of the chord. Yeah, I feel like the way we recorded the piano really captured, for me musically and texturally, what it must have felt like for Christ to be alone on the cross, the sense of complete abandonment he felt when he called out to God. Yeah, that's got to be one of my top 3 favorites on the record, that song where Christ is asking his disciples to stay with him, to stay awake while he goes. He knows what he's about to face, and they don't have a clue. So he's asking them to stay with him in the garden. And to me, there's such a longing in that song. The way the melody falls, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow. The melody falls into the word sorrow. And it seemed to me, I kept on hearing, English horn or oboe, and cello. To me, those instruments can really sound like such longing in them, So, and we were talking earlier about how the cello is so similar to the human voice that people, I think, can really be drawn into the tone and timbre of that instrument. So, yeah, that was a song that really called out for both of those instruments. A friend of mine, James Isaac, played oboe on that song, and he lives in Switzerland, so it was recorded in Switzerland. I think this record did take some turns. When I first started out making it, I imagined that there would be all the narration would be sung, like in the Bach Passions that I meant, St. John and St. Matthew Passion. The narrator is constantly singing. But then it sort of morphed into more of a spoken part, partially because it was too hard to write decent melodies to some of these spoken parts. So that was a major turn for me, that it wasn't going to be all music continued all the way through. There were actually going to be spoken parts. And once it took that turn, I feel like it became sort of a record like some meditation on the death of Christ, something that could be used possibly in a small home group or in somebody's personal devotional time. And I hadn't foreseen that before, but now to me it sort of has that feel. Somebody could sit on a plane with their headset on and sort of have their own little communion service, I guess.
This bread is my body.